If you take a look across the wide catalog of 3D platformers over the years, you'll find some levels where the gameplay that's present in the rest of the game is momentarily put aside to make way for a particular type of set piece. Settled down between its two more controversial cousins, slide levels have silently become an important part of the 3D platformer toolkit. And that's despite sharing many of the often cited reasons for their disdain. Slide levels just haven't nearly reached the same level of internet ire that ice levels and underwater levels have. And as with any piece of the 3D platformer toolkit, if we're going to start anywhere with slide levels, we should probably start with Mario 64. In subrooms of Peach's Castle, Cool Cool Mountain, and Tall Tall Mountain, the game's genre-defining platforming controls are set aside in favor of a fresher, more simple action, sliding down a path. These certainly aren't the first slide levels, but they are pretty emblematic of how they function in 3D games. Even for a game normally filled with disconnected diorama-type levels, these slide levels feel especially secluded. There isn't really anything tying this structure to the world. There's no supports, no skybox. Save for a couple tunnels, it really is just a slide in midair, tethered only to the entrances and exits in the walls. Creating the context and infrastructure needed to ground these sublevels probably just didn't really make much sense to spend precious development time on, and it wouldn't make them any more fun. And even though Mario Sunshine centered itself around a more consistent world, its slide level was also placed into a dreamlike cloud environment. It would seem like the only way to ground these levels in realism is to find a side of a mountain to pin them to. But is that really necessary? Here we have an archetypal slide level. It's got separating paths, collectibles and destructibles, interior sections, exterior sections, and plenty of jumps. And once you reach the bottom, getting back up at the top is one imagination box away. This is a slide level from SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, developed by Heavy Iron Studios, a developer known for their work on tie-in games. And in normal tie-in game fashion, a lot of the elements of the game are taken directly from the episodes of the show that it's based on. In over 100 hours of runtime, SpongeBob is shown sliding in just 2 episodes, before it's set aside and never explored again. Which, honestly, is a pretty perfect parallel to slide levels in general. Crash, Sonic, and a handful of other games had this sort of gameplay diversion too, each employing the movement mechanics, level separation, and in most cases, dreamlike environmental grounding, each for just a moment, and then setting the idea aside before it gets to be too much. Some of these add more bells and whistles and flourish the sliding concept a bit more, but one thing is pretty consistent throughout. None of them get too lost in realism. It's interesting to see that often, for an element so rooted in physics, its environment simply can't be. Sandy Mountain, despite being a level placed on a ski slope, still set aside its physical believability in favor of a much more important aspect: being fun. Sure, these floating crates don't make a lot of sense in a realistic world, but it's just a lot of fun to blast through these after flying off a ramp that would absolutely never pass health and safety inspections. That being said, I don't think these really raise any alarm bells from within the suspended disbelief. It's a video game, after all. Battle for Bikini Bottom eventually takes this dreamlike relationship with slide levels and their physicality to its logical extreme. Its other slide levels appear within a literal dream world, as SpongeBob travels through his friends' dreams in search of more golden spatulas near the end of the game. Sandy's dream world in particular is a commanding visual. SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom is a collectathon that's pretty representative of the era of 3D platformers that it came out in. Actually, it shares quite a few elements with a pretty unexpected action platformer. The only shared element here important to our purposes is that Psychonauts also has a slide level in a literal dream world. Here it's also given a racing minigame, a pretty common addition to these sorts of levels, and a whole second can of worms in regards to gameplay switch-ups for the sake of pacing and variety. This level in particular also serves as a tutorial barrier to ensure you understand the levitation ball mechanics well enough to perform in a race against computer players. I suppose some might argue that this isn't a slide level, since Raz isn't actually sliding, but I don't think the part that gives these levels their charm and purpose is the physical act of sliding. Kirby is a series pretty well known for its gameplay diversions and subrooms, and one such gameplay diversion in Kirby and the Forgotten Land are these downhill sections, with directionally limited movement used to connect levels and keep the pace up and put a little variety into the gameplay. But there's no sliding happening here. This is gliding. The precise line of language provided by the word slide here fails to consider the similarities between this and other slide levels. Slide or glide, I think it's pretty clear that these are very similar elements. Maybe a better word is in order. This is a set piece that performs the same role as a slide level, with the same physical context and altered controls, but differs only in the exact verb happening. Or grind, whether that's on rails like in Ratchet & Clank, or on vines like in Kingdom Hearts. Rail grinding sections have the same flavors and gameplay implications as a slide level. But we're really starting to reach the edge of the blurry line here. I mean, does this now include sections in Crash where he runs from a boulder? I don't know. And I don't think the line really needs to get drawn. Slide levels are just one iteration in the long list of mechanical diversions. And unlike those controversial cousins, slide levels just tend to come and go. In a very literal sense, slide levels keep moving forward. And unless you're asking someone who's tried to get the Ultima weapon in Kingdom Hearts 3, I don't think you'll find anyone particularly upset when faced with a slide. Some might say they're just less common versions of ice and underwater levels, and in a way I think they might be right. But you can say one thing about slide levels: they don't overstay their welcome.